Hello everybody and welcome to the Standing Image YouTube channel. We've got another video here from 399 Strand today, and today we're going to look at some of the treasures which have survived from the De La Rue archive. Now, most stamp collectors have heard of De La Rue. It's one of the most iconic printers of British Empire stamps, and they had direct dealings, and most of the contracts from the Crown agents for the British colonies went to De La Rue. Now, over the course of De La Rue's production, they managed to compile 325 correspondence books and 66 day books, which were used as part of the production process. And they were used basically since September 1883. And they contained all manner of proofs of edits of all the letters between countries and the printers and the Crown agents. And much of it has, fortunately for philately, survived and is on the market today. So the first time that material like this was viewed was actually in June 1955, where a display of 400 pages from the De La Rue collection was shown at the Royal Philatelic Society in London. And philatelists today have largely a man called Leslie Newman to thank, who was the De La Rue archivist. And he spent a lot of time poring through these correspondence books, poring through these day books, and preserving things of philatelic importance. So he would go through, annotate it, explain the printing process, and essentially was responsible for preserving and writing up a huge amount of this material. Now, after a sort of dalliance with sending it to institutions, the collection was briefly in the British Museum. In the end, in 1970s, well, over the 1970s and to the start of the 1980s, De La Rue actually decided to sell the collection. And it went through onto the market through a company called Robson Lowe, who's one of the greatest ever philatelists. And the collection was sold variously via auction, private treaty, throughout the 1970s. Now, when the De La Rue collection, and when we say the De La Rue collection, this is the written up collection that Leslie Newman, the archivist, produced. When that collection was split up, philatelists were very, very lucky in that it was actually photographed intact before it was ever split up onto microfilm. And the Royal Philatelic Society eventually published a 6-volume book of all these films, and it's now preserved not only on the Royal Philatelic Society website, but in this beautiful printed book. The way the book works is obviously there's an introduction at the start and the index, but all these wonderful, wonderful photographs of how the De La Rue collection looked, intact, all the proofs of all different countries, they're all there. Essays, proofs, a little bit of correspondence, appendix sheets, it's all here. And I say it's all here, the Newman collection is all here. What's interesting about this is that actually this 6-volume set probably accounts for about a third of the De La Rue archive material on the market. So we'll take a look at some of the material we've got in stock today. So I can just explain a bit. So when we look at Transvaal here in the revenue section, you can see how this material originally appeared in the De La Rue collection. But that page actually features this appendix sheet of Transvaal. Now, generally when we look at appendix sheets, these were fundamentally samples produced by the printers. And this is for Transvaal native pass stamps, which are sort of labour passports in Transvaal at the time. Now, these essays have been produced, or trials, to decide whether the pass overprint should go in the middle or at the bottom. And you can see on the right here, you get the approval from the initials WHM, which was Sir William Hepworth Mercer, who was agent for the Crown colonies. So a lot of this surviving material is fundamentally a big part of the production process and a way that philatelists can tell the stories of the stamps. So these 2 appendix sheets here, these are actually a good example of something very, very spectacular that doesn't actually appear in the De La Rue collection. It came out privately afterwards. And this is a great example So this one dated the 1st of October 1901. This was a colour scheme which they had proposed for the revenue stamps. And you can pretty much see here that all of them were fine. And when they went out as issued, the £25 is in black and grey. All of these were issued, but they didn't like the 5 shilling. So they've crossed it out and they've said, actually, we're not going to issue that one. See Appendix F. And then when you go to Appendix F, you see they've circled it. They're like, for the 5 shillings, we'll go for this one. And then you get, again, approved WHM, referenced on the first one, see Appendix F. Appendix F is here, dated 8 days later. So when philatelists are looking at this and why this is such desirable material is because it tells the full production process from start to finish. And when you're looking at exhibiting, when you're looking at advanced collecting, telling the story of an issue is not only a really, really fun thing to do, it's hugely important and obviously highly desirable because it's very, very rare. When we look at the production process, the kind of things that came out of the Delarue archive go right from this genesis of an issue. You've got these hand-painted essays here, literally done with almost a single hair paintbrush, some of the detail on these things. These, again, GB stamps almost exactly as issued. But what's fascinating about the Delarue archive is that you also get things which weren't issued. So when we look at the 1892 4.5p Jubilee stamp, you've got this wonderful artist's essay here, which was produced as part of a trial. So this was option A in the trial, but a different design was chosen. So actually what you get an insight into here is stamps which were proposed but never actually issued. So the Jubilee set is one of the most popular in the whole of Great Britain philately. It's one of the most iconic, but pretty much entire collections are based on that. And you get, through this Delarue archive, you get an insight into things that never even were issued. You also get things which are of quite huge historic importance, really. If we look at this essay, again, this is from Transvaal, which just came into stock this week. This is an essay of Queen Victoria. It's a bromide essay, so a photographic essay. So it's essentially a photograph of a hand-painted essay. But what's important about this one and why this is so fascinating is this is actually dated November the 28th, 1900. We're very early on in the process here. This is option D in an array of essays which were presented to Transvaal. And the reason this never went ahead is because Queen Victoria actually died just 60 days later, well, roughly 60 days later in January 1901. So this actually never ever went ahead with Queen Victoria's portrait. And so when you look at this stamp in particular, you've got a £10 face value in 1900 or 1901, which would be monumental. But what's interesting about this essay is its postage and revenue. So when you see an insight into this, if Queen Victoria died even 3 months later, what we'd be looking at here would be one of the most desirable and iconic stamps of the entire Victorian reign in red and black. It would be one of the most iconic high values had it gone ahead. As it happened, Queen Victoria died, and then that led to this issue with King Edward VII instead. So you get much more than just sort of stamp production. You get an insight into the history, changing of monarchs and everything. So you get so much depth in your collection and in your exhibits from examining this material, trying to come up with a chronology and trying to paint as detailed a picture as you can of each issue. Some of the other things you get is you get these wonderful little early engravings. So after the artist's essays are produced, obviously it goes to an engraver. So you get things like portrait engravings here, which are very early stage. Again, they're usually marked, dated for approval and things like that. And then very late on in the process, when we get all the way to the end, so after we've gone, if we go around the table here, you start essays, you then go engravings, you then get basically bromide designs, the trials. You then get what are known as file copies. And now these are the ones which are actually kept by Delarue for their own reference. So these are the final stamps which are printed. And usually, so if you take this set of Transvaal, the specimen types that they've used here this is a completely unique set. They're affixed to the original archive pages. And again, when you're linking it back, this set appears in the De La Rue collection. There we go. So this set appears there in the De La Rue collection. So you have provenance dating back to the original source as well. So as well as being things of great beauty and great historical importance and great interest, you have just a wonderful, wonderful array of material from all over the globe to add to your collection and add some real depth. So we always try our best to have some in stock, but I hope you've enjoyed today's video, and it just gives you a great insight into one of the great printers of philatelic history.